What if I told you that serving divorce papers to your 8 months pregnant wife could be the biggest mistake of your life? Michael Collins thought he had it all figured out. A $45 million tech empire, a stunning young actress waiting in the wings, and a wife he assumed would quietly disappear with whatever scraps he threw her way. But here's what Michael didn't know about Sarah Collins. Behind her quiet demeanor and museum curator job was something that would make his entire fortune look like pocket change. Because when you systematically destroy someone's life, you better make sure you know exactly who you're going to war with. This is the story of what happens when a cheating husband picks the wrong woman to underestimate. It's about hidden allies, corporate warfare, and the most satisfying comeback you'll ever witness. By the end of this tale, Michael Collins will discover that some women don't just get mad, they get even in ways that will change everything. So buckle up, because you're about to witness the most expensive divorce mistake in history. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single twist in this incredible journey of justice served cold. Sarah Collins stared at the pregnancy test in her trembling hands, two pink lines confirming what she already suspected. 8 months pregnant, and her husband Michael had been working late again, the third time this week. She set the test on their marble bathroom counter and picked up the credit card statement that had arrived that morning. Her eyes scanned the charges, stopping cold at a line item that made her blood freeze. Tiffany and Company, $3,400. Last Tuesday. She'd never received any jewelry from Tiffany. Not last Tuesday, not ever. Sarah walked to their walk-in closet, her 8-month belly making movement awkward. She pulled out Michael's jacket from last Tuesday, the navy Armani he wore to important meetings. In the inside pocket, she found what she was looking for, a small blue box still containing the receipt. "For my beautiful Jessica," the gift note read in Michael's handwriting, "until we can be together always." The box slipped from her numb fingers, clattering onto the hardwood floor. Sarah sank onto their California king bed, the same bed where Michael had held her just 2 months ago, promising they'd be amazing parents together. Her phone buzzed, a text from Michael. "Working late again tonight, big investor meeting, don't wait up." Sarah screenshot the message and opened her laptop. She'd given up her promising marketing career 3 years ago to support Michael's tech startup, Tech Solutions. The company was now worth $45 million, and Michael never let her forget who'd sacrificed what for whom. But Sarah hadn't forgotten her investigative skills. She logged into their shared cloud storage and began searching through Michael's files. What she found made her stomach turn. Photos, dozens of them. Michael with a stunning blonde woman who looked barely 25. On his boat. In restaurants Sarah had never been to. At industry events where he'd told Sarah she'd be bored by all the tech talk. The woman was tagged in several photos. Jessica Vale, aspiring actress/influencer, according to her Instagram profile. Sarah's hands shook as she scrolled through months of evidence. Her husband hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been building an entire second life with this woman while Sarah stayed home, preparing for their first child. A car door slammed outside. Michael was home early. Sarah quickly closed the laptop and shoved the Tiffany box under her pillow. She positioned herself in bed, pretending to read one of the pregnancy books stacked on her nightstand. "Hey, babe," Michael called from downstairs, his voice carrying its usual confident tone. "How was your day?" "Fine," Sarah called back. Surprised, her voice sounded steady. "How was the investor meeting?" A pause, too long of a pause. "Productive," Michael replied, climbing the stairs. "We're looking at a potential acquisition that could triple our valuation." He entered their bedroom, loosening his tie. The same tie he'd worn in one of the photos with Jessica, Sarah realized. He leaned down to kiss her forehead, and she caught a whiff of unfamiliar perfume. "You okay?" Michael asked, studying her face. "You look pale." "Just tired," Sarah said. "The baby's been kicking all day." Michael placed his hand on her belly, and for a moment Sarah saw a flicker of the man she'd fallen in love with 5 years ago. Then his phone buzzed, and he immediately pulled away to check it. "Sorry, work emergency," he muttered, typing rapidly. "I need to handle this." He disappeared into his home office, closing the door behind him. Sarah heard the lock click. She pulled out her own phone and called the one person she'd been avoiding for months, her sister Diana. "Sarah?" Diana's voice was surprised. They hadn't spoken since their argument about Michael's controlling behavior last Christmas. Everything okay? Diana, Sarah whispered. I need help. I think Michael is having an affair. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Where are you? Diana asked, her voice immediately shifting into lawyer mode. Home. He's in his office. Don't confront him yet. We need to gather evidence first. Can you get to my office tomorrow? Sarah looked toward Michael's locked office door, then down at her swollen belly. 8 months pregnant, financially dependent, and married to a man who was already planning his exit strategy. Yes, she said quietly. I'll be there. After hanging up, Sarah lay in the dark, feeling her baby move restlessly inside her. She wondered if the child could sense her distress, if somehow this innocent life was already being affected by her father's betrayal. Tomorrow she'd start fighting back. Tonight she'd plan. The baby shower decorations still hung from the trees in their backyard when Michael dropped the bomb that would shatter Sarah's world forever. 30 of their closest friends and family members had gathered to celebrate the upcoming arrival of baby Collins. Sarah had spent weeks planning every detail, from the gender-neutral yellow and green color scheme to the elaborate cake shaped like a stork. She was opening the last gift, a beautiful handmade baby blanket from her college roommate, when Michael stood up suddenly. The conversations around their patio table gradually died as everyone noticed his serious expression. Actually, everyone, Michael announced, his voice carrying the same authoritative tone he used in board meetings. There's something Sarah and I need to share with you. Sarah looked up from the soft blanket in her hands, confusion creeping across her face. They hadn't discussed sharing anything beyond their excitement about becoming parents. Michael, she said quietly, what are you talking about? He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the law firm's letterhead, visible through the partially open flap. Sarah, Michael said, his voice unnaturally calm. I've been trying to find the right time to discuss this privately, but I think it's better if everyone knows the truth. He handed her the envelope. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes scanning the legal documents inside. The words petition for dissolution of marriage seemed to jump off the page. Divorce papers? Sarah whispered, the documents slipping from her numb fingers and scattering across the patio table. You're serving me divorce papers at our baby shower? The collective gasp from their guests was audible. Sarah's mother stood up so quickly, her chair toppled backward. Michael Collins, her mother said, her voice shaking with rage. What in God's name do you think you're doing? Michael straightened his shoulders, adopting the confident posture that had served him well in business negotiations. I'm being honest about our situation. Sarah and I have grown apart. We want different things from life, and it's better for everyone involved if we acknowledge that reality. I'm 8 months pregnant with your child, Sarah said, her voice rising despite her shock. How have we grown apart? When did we grow apart? Sarah, please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be, Michael replied, his tone suggesting she was being unreasonable. My attorney has prepared a very generous settlement offer. You'll be well provided for. Sarah's sister Diana pushed through the crowd of stunned guests. As a successful divorce attorney, she recognized the calculated cruelty of Michael's timing. You bastard, Diana said directly to Michael's face. You couldn't have this conversation privately? You had to humiliate my sister in front of everyone she cares about? I wanted to be transparent, Michael said. Sarah has a tendency to embellish situations when she's emotional. I thought it was better if everyone heard the truth directly from me. The audacity of his words hit Sarah like a physical blow. He was already rewriting their history, painting her as unstable and emotional, setting the narrative for their divorce before she even knew they were getting one. The truth? Sarah struggled to her feet, her advanced pregnancy making the movement awkward. You want to talk about truth, Michael? Should I tell everyone about Jessica Vale? Should I mention the $3,000 necklace you bought her last week? Michael's composed facade cracked slightly. Sarah, you're overwrought. This is exactly the kind of paranoid behavior I'm talking about. But Sarah was beyond caring about appearances now. She pulled out her phone and opened Jessica's Instagram profile, turning the screen toward their guests. This is Jessica Vale, she announced. She's 26 years old, an aspiring actress, and apparently my husband's girlfriend. There are photos of them together going back months. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Michael's business partner Robert stepped forward, his face ashen. Michael, Robert said quietly, We should discuss this privately. There's nothing to discuss, Michael replied, but his voice had lost its earlier confidence. Sarah is having a difficult pregnancy, and she's become increasingly unstable and suspicious. I've tried to be patient, but I can't continue living this way. Sarah felt the world spinning around her. He was gaslighting her in front of 30 people, making her out to be the crazy pregnant wife, while he positioned himself as the long-suffering husband. Unstable? Sarah's voice cracked. I'm unstable because I found evidence of your affair? I'm unstable because I discovered you've been lying to me for months? Her mother approached and wrapped protective arms around Sarah's shoulders. Michael, I think you should leave. Now. This is my house, Michael replied coldly. But you're right, I should go. I have plans tonight anyway. The casual cruelty of that statement hung in the air. He had plans on the day he destroyed his wife's life in front of everyone she loved. As Michael walked toward the house, he paused and turned back to the stunned group. By the way, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, Jessica and I will be making our relationship official once the divorce is finalized. I hope you'll all be as supportive of my happiness as you've been of Sarah's delusions. After he left, Sarah collapsed into her chair, surrounded by torn wrapping paper, baby gifts, and the scattered pages of divorce documents. Her baby shower had become her public execution, and Michael had been the executioner. Diana knelt beside her sister's chair. Sarah, look at me. We're going to fight this. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win. But as Sarah looked around at the faces of her friends and family, all reflecting various degrees of shock and pity, she wondered how anyone could come back from this level of betrayal and humiliation. The decorations still hung cheerfully from the trees, mocking the celebration that would never be. 2 weeks after the baby shower disaster, Sarah discovered that Michael's cruelty had only just begun. What she initially thought was his spontaneous decision to leave her was actually part of a calculated campaign designed to isolate her completely. It started with small things: friends who stopped returning her calls, invitations that mysteriously stopped arriving, social events where she was suddenly uninvited due to space constraints or awkward circumstances. Sarah's first clue came from her friend Jennifer, who'd known them both since college. Sarah, Jennifer said carefully during an uncomfortable coffee meeting, Michael called me last week. He's really worried about you. Worried about me? Sarah adjusted her position in the coffee shop chair, her 9-month pregnancy making everything uncomfortable. What exactly did he tell you? Jennifer looked around nervously, as if Michael might be listening. He said you've been having episodes. Paranoid thoughts, mood swings, obsessive behavior. He showed me some texts you sent him that were concerning. Sarah's blood ran cold. What texts? Accusations about affairs, threats about taking his money, claims that he was plotting against you. Jennifer's voice was gentle but worried. Sarah, I know pregnancy hormones can be overwhelming, but some of the things he showed me. Jennifer, I never sent threatening texts to Michael. I confronted him about his affair because I had evidence. Photos, credit card statements, receipts. But even as Sarah spoke, she could see doubt creeping into Jennifer's eyes. Michael had gotten there first, controlling the narrative before Sarah even knew she needed to defend herself. He said you'd deny it, Jennifer said quietly. He said you might not even remember sending them because you've been so emotionally unstable. Sarah felt trapped in a nightmare. Not only was Michael cheating on her, but he was systematically destroying her reputation and credibility, making her look crazy so that when the divorce proceedings began, no one would believe her side of the story. Over the next few days, the pattern became clear. Michael had contacted their entire social circle, spinning a carefully crafted story about Sarah's declining mental health. He presented himself as the concerned husband trying to hold his family together while dealing with his wife's pregnancy-induced psychological breakdown. The evidence he provided was damning. Text messages that Sarah had never sent, emails with her name attached that she'd never written, voice recordings that sounded like her voice, but contained threats and paranoid accusations she'd never made. Sarah's sister Diana examined the fake evidence with growing fury. This is sophisticated, Diana said. Spread the fabricated texts across her law office desk. He's had help creating these. Professional help. But how is this legal? Sarah asked. Can't we prove they're fake? Proving digital evidence is fabricated requires expensive forensic analysis and expert witnesses. Michael knows that. He's counting on you not having the resources to fight back properly. Diana was right. Since Sarah had given up her career, she had no independent income. Their joint accounts had been frozen pending the divorce proceedings, leaving her with only the small emergency fund she'd hidden in a separate account years ago. The isolation campaign wasn't just social. Michael had also been methodically cutting off her access to resources and support systems. He'd changed the locks on their house while she was at Diana's office, claiming concern for his safety given Sarah's alleged unstable behavior. She was only allowed to retrieve personal items under supervision, and many of her belongings had mysteriously disappeared. Her credit cards were canceled due to suspicious activity that Michael reported to the banks. Her access to their financial accounts was revoked because Michael claimed she'd been making erratic and potentially dangerous financial decisions. Even worse, Michael had filed a temporary restraining order against Sarah, claiming she'd been stalking and harassing him. The order prevented her from coming within 500 feet of their home, his office, or anywhere Michael claimed to frequent regularly. Sarah found herself effectively homeless, financially powerless, and socially isolated, all while 9 months pregnant with Michael's child. The masterstroke came when Sarah received a call from her obstetrician's office. "Mrs. Collins," the receptionist said apologetically, "I'm calling because there seems to be an issue with your insurance coverage. Your husband called to report that you're no longer covered under his policy due to concerns about your mental health affecting your decision-making capacity." Sarah nearly dropped the phone. "He removed me from our health insurance while I'm about to give birth? I'm sorry, Mrs. Collins. We'll need you to provide alternative insurance information or arrange for private payment before your next appointment." That evening, Sarah sat in Diana's guest bedroom, surrounded by the few possessions she'd been allowed to retrieve from her own home. Her due date was less than 2 weeks away, and she had no home, no money, no insurance, and no husband. But she also had something Michael didn't expect: rage, pure, focused rage that was stronger than her fear or despair. Diana knocked on the bedroom door and entered, carrying a cup of tea and a determined expression. "I've been making calls," Diana said. "I found someone who can help us, a private investigator named Thomas Hayes. He specializes in cases involving digital fraud and evidence manipulation." "I can't afford a private investigator," Sarah said. "I can, and I will, because Michael Collins just made the biggest mistake of his life." Diana sat on the edge of the bed, her voice growing stronger. "He thinks he's isolated you completely, but what he's actually done is remove all the restraints that were keeping you from fighting back with everything you've got." Sarah felt her baby kick forcefully, as if responding to the conversation. Maybe her child was already preparing for the battle ahead. "What do we do first?" Sarah asked. Diana smiled grimly. "We show Michael Collins what happens when he underestimates a woman with nothing left to lose." Sarah's water broke during the worst argument of her life. She was standing in the hallway outside family court, waiting for her emergency custody hearing, when the first contraction hit. Michael's lawyers had filed a motion claiming Sarah was mentally unfit to care for their unborn child, requesting immediate supervised visitation only. "Your Honor," Michael's attorney was saying through the courtroom door, "my client is deeply concerned about his wife's psychological state and its potential impact on their child's safety and well-being." Sarah doubled over as another contraction gripped her, this one stronger than the first. Diana caught her arm, steadying her. "Sarah? What's happening?" "The baby," Sarah gasped, feeling warm liquid trickling down her legs. "The baby's coming." But even as Diana helped her toward the exit, Sarah could hear Michael's lawyer continuing his character assassination inside the courtroom. How she'd sent threatening messages, how she'd demonstrated erratic and potentially dangerous behavior, how Michael feared for the safety of their child if left alone with Sarah. "We need to get you to the hospital," Diana said, flagging down a court security officer. "No," Sarah said through gritted teeth. "I need to be in that courtroom. I need to defend myself." Another contraction hit, and this time Sarah cried out involuntarily. The security officer immediately called for an ambulance, and within minutes, Sarah found herself strapped to a gurney, racing toward the hospital while her legal fate was being decided without her. At Presbyterian Hospital, Dr. Martinez examined Sarah with growing concern. "Mrs. Collins, your blood pressure is dangerously elevated, and the baby is showing signs of distress. We need to deliver immediately." "How early?" Sarah asked, fear replacing her anger. 36 weeks, not ideal, but viable. However, I'm concerned about the stress levels you've been experiencing. This kind of prolonged emotional trauma can have serious effects on both mother and baby. As the medical team prepared Sarah for an emergency cesarean section, she received the call that completed her nightmare. Sarah, Diana's voice was strained through the phone. I need to tell you what happened in court. Did we win the motion? Sarah, Michael's lawyers presented evidence that you've been secretly recording his conversations and attempting to access his business accounts without authorization. They're claiming corporate espionage. Sarah felt the world spinning around her as the anesthesiologist prepared her IV. Diana, I never did any of those things. I know you didn't, but they have digital evidence. Computer logs, recorded phone calls, bank access attempts, all traced back to your laptop and phone. But that's impossible. My laptop was taken when Michael changed the locks. The terrible realization hit them both simultaneously. Michael had used Sarah's devices to create evidence of crimes she'd never committed. There's more, Diana continued reluctantly. The judge granted Michael temporary full custody. You'll have supervised visitation only, and all contact with the baby has to go through court-appointed social services. Sarah's son was born 20 minutes later, 6 pounds and 2 ounces of perfect, vulnerable humanity. As Dr. Martinez placed the baby on Sarah's chest for the brief moment allowed by protocol, she looked into her son's eyes and saw her entire future. Hello, baby boy, she whispered. Mommy's going to fix this, I promise. But even as she spoke, a court-appointed social worker entered the room, accompanied by a hospital security guard. Mrs. Collins, the social worker said gently, I'm Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services. I need to inform you that your son will be placed in temporary custody pending the resolution of your family court proceedings. No, Sarah said, instinctively tightening her hold on her newborn. You can't take him. I just gave birth. I'm his mother. I understand this is difficult, Janet said, but we have court orders requiring supervised placement due to concerns about your mental health and recent legal issues. Sarah watched in horror as nurses took her son from her arms. He was placed in a portable incubator and wheeled toward the NICU, where he'd received the care his premature birth required. When can I see him? Sarah asked, tears streaming down her face. Visitation will be arranged through the court system, Janet replied. 2 hours a day with supervision. 2 hours? Sarah's voice cracked. He's my baby. I carried him for 8 months. I just gave birth to him. Mrs. Collins, I know this seems harsh, but these measures are temporary. If you comply with the court's requirements and demonstrate stable behavior, the restrictions can be modified. After everyone left, Sarah lay alone in her hospital bed, her body aching from surgery and her arms empty of the child she'd carried for months. Through her window, she could see the NICU 1 floor down, where her son was fighting for health while strangers made decisions about his future. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Saw the news about the baby. Hope you both recover quickly. Maybe now you'll understand that fighting me was pointless. Michael. Sarah stared at the message, feeling something cold and sharp crystallize in her chest. Michael had taken her home, her money, her friends, her reputation, and now her newborn son. He'd systematically destroyed every aspect of her life while positioning himself as the reasonable party trying to deal with his unstable wife. But Michael had made one crucial mistake. He'd given Sarah nothing left to lose, and a woman with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous opponent he could imagine. Diana appeared in the doorway, carrying flowers and wearing an expression Sarah had never seen before. Pure professional fury. I've been making calls, Diana said without preamble. I found something Michael doesn't know we found. What? His business partner Robert wants to meet with us. Apparently, Michael's been doing some creative accounting at Coltech Solutions, and Robert has been documenting everything. Sarah looked out the window toward the NICU where her son was sleeping, monitored by machines and cared for by strangers. Set up the meeting, she said quietly. It's time to remind Michael Collins exactly who he chose to go to war with. Robert Sterling had been Michael's best friend since college, his business partner for 8 years, and the best man at Michael and Sarah's wedding. He also had the kind of detailed financial records that could destroy Coltech Solutions overnight. Sarah met him at a quiet coffee shop 3 days after giving birth, her body still aching from surgery, and her heart raw from only being allowed to see her son for supervised 2-hour visits. "Sarah," Robert said, standing as she approached his corner table, "I'm so sorry about everything that's happened." Robert was tall and lean, with kind eyes and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who cared more about substance than style. He'd always been the steady counterpoint to Michael's flashy ambition. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Sarah said, easing carefully into her chair. "Diana said you have information about Michael's business practices." Robert opened a laptop and pulled out a thick folder of documents. "Sarah, I need you to know that I've been struggling with this for months. Michael is my oldest friend, but what he's doing is wrong. To you, to the company, to everyone involved." He spread financial statements across the table between them. "Caltech Solutions is not the success story Michael has been telling investors. We're actually hemorrhaging money, and Michael has been cooking the books to hide it." Sarah studied the documents, her marketing background helping her understand the implications. "How bad is it?" "Bad. We're 3 months away from bankruptcy unless we secure major new investment. But Michael has been presenting false revenue figures to potential investors, claiming we're profitable when we're actually losing money every quarter." Robert pulled out another set of documents. "Worse, he's been siphoning company funds for personal use. The boat, the jewelry for Jessica, the expensive dinners and trips. All of it charged to business accounts as fake consulting fees and marketing expenses." "That's embezzlement," Sarah said. "It gets worse. Michael has been using your name and social security number to secure business loans without your knowledge. If the company goes under, you'll be personally liable for over $2 million in debt." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. $2 million? I have copies of everything. Loan applications with forged signatures, fraudulent tax returns, investors' contracts based on completely fabricated financial data. Robert's voice was heavy with regret. "Sarah, Michael hasn't just been lying to you about his affair. He's been lying to everyone about everything." Diana leaned forward intently. "Robert, would you be willing to testify about this? In court?" "More than that," Robert said. "I'm willing to help you bring him down. What Michael has done to Sarah is unforgivable, but what he's done to our investors and employees is criminal." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a spark of hope. Michael had been so careful to control every narrative, to position himself as the victim of Sarah's instability. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He trusted his business partner to stay loyal while he committed multiple felonies. "What do you need from me?" Sarah asked. "I need you to file a complaint with the FBI about the identity theft and fraud. I need you to demand a full forensic audit of Caltech's finances. And I need you to be prepared for Michael to fight back harder than he ever has before." Diana was already taking notes. "This changes everything. We can file criminal charges, demand asset freezing, and expose his whole house of cards." Sarah thought about her son in the NICU, surrounded by machines and strangers, about the supervised visits where she was treated like a potential threat to her own child, about Michael's text message gloating about her powerlessness. "Let's do it," she said. The FBI investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within a week, federal agents had seized Caltech's servers and frozen the company's accounts. Michael's elaborate financial schemes unraveled under professional scrutiny, revealing years of systematic fraud. Sarah's favorite moment came when FBI agents arrested Michael during a business dinner with potential investors. According to Robert, who witnessed the arrest, Michael was in the middle of presenting falsified revenue projections when federal agents interrupted to read him his rights for wire fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. The local news picked up the story immediately. Tech CEO arrested for defrauding investors and identity theft. Michael's carefully cultivated image as a successful entrepreneur collapsed overnight. Even better, the criminal charges gave Sarah significant leverage in family court. It was harder for Michael's lawyers to argue that Sarah was the unstable party when their client was facing potential federal prison time. Judge Harrison granted Sarah increased visitation with her son and ordered a full investigation into the custody arrangements that had been based on Michael's fabricated evidence. "Mrs. Collins," Judge Harrison said during the hearing, "given the new information about fraudulent evidence presentation in this case, I'm ordering a complete review of all custody decisions made in the past month." Sarah sat in the courtroom, feeling victorious for the first time since her nightmare began. Michael sat at the defendant's table, no longer the confident businessman but a man facing serious federal charges. Jessica was nowhere to be seen, having apparently disappeared the moment Michael's financial house of cards collapsed. That evening, Sarah was finally allowed to hold her son for more than 2 hours. Baby David was thriving despite his premature birth, and Sarah felt the overwhelming relief of a mother whose child was safe and healthy. "We did it," she told Diana as they left the hospital together. "We actually did it." Diana smiled, but something in her expression seemed cautious. "Sarah, this is a great victory, but be careful. Cornered animals are dangerous, and Michael still has resources we don't know about." Sarah looked back at the hospital where her son was sleeping peacefully, no longer under the threat of being permanently separated from his mother. "Let him try," she said confidently. "The worst is over. What else could he possibly do to me now?" Diana didn't answer, but her expression suggested she was afraid they were about to find out. Sarah should have known that Michael Collins didn't become a multimillionaire by giving up when the odds turned against him. The devastating counterattack came exactly 1 week after his arrest, delivered with surgical precision designed to destroy everything Sarah had fought to rebuild. She was feeding her son in the hospital's family room, finally allowed extended unsupervised visits, when Diana burst through the door with an expression of pure panic. "Sarah, we need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, immediately protective of baby David in her arms. "Michael's lawyers filed new motions this morning. They're claiming Robert Sterling has been embezzling from Coltech Solutions and that you've been working with him to frame Michael." Sarah felt the world tilt beneath her. "That's insane. Robert came to us with evidence of Michael's crimes. They have documentation showing Robert has been moving money from company accounts for months. Bank records, email communications, digital transfers, all of it pointing to a conspiracy between you and Robert to steal from the company and blame Michael." Diana helped Sarah gather baby David's things as she continued explaining the nightmare unfolding around them. Worse, they're claiming the affair allegations against Michael were part of an elaborate scheme you and Robert devised to discredit him so you could take over the company. They have evidence suggesting you and Robert have been romantically involved for years. "That's completely fabricated," Sarah said, but even as she spoke, she realized how convincing Michael's narrative would sound to people who didn't know the truth. "Sarah, there are photos, professional quality images of you and Robert together that appear to span months or even years, meeting in secret, exchanging documents, embracing intimately." Sarah stared at Diana in horror. "Those photos are fake. They have to be." "Of course they're fake, but they're extremely sophisticated. Deep fake technology combined with professional photo manipulation. Michael hired the same team that created the fake text messages and emails before, but this time they've outdone themselves." The implications crashed over Sarah like a tsunami. Michael wasn't just defending himself against her accusations. He was completely rewriting reality, making her and Robert the villains in a story of corporate conspiracy and adultery. "There's more," Diana continued grimly. "Remember how we thought it was convenient that Robert came forward right when we needed him most?" Sarah felt ice forming in her stomach. "You think Michael planned this?" "I think Michael has been playing chess while we've been playing checkers. Robert Sterling has been his business partner for 8 years. What if Michael has been manipulating Robert all along, feeding him false information and setting him up to be the fall guy?" Sarah's phone rang. Robert's name appeared on the screen. "Sarah!" Robert's voice was strained with panic. "The FBI just raided my apartment. They're claiming I've been embezzling from Coltech for years. They found evidence in my personal accounts that I swear I didn't put there." "Robert, where are you now?" "My lawyer's office." "Sarah, I think Michael has been setting me up from the beginning. Every document I showed you, every piece of evidence about his financial crimes, I realize now that Michael made sure I found it. He wanted me to come to you with that information." The pieces of Michael's master plan began falling into place in Sarah's mind. He'd allowed Robert to discover evidence of financial crimes, knowing Robert's conscience wouldn't let him stay silent. When Robert approached Sarah, Michael was ready with a counter-strike that would destroy both of them, while positioning himself as the victim of their conspiracy. "Sarah," Robert continued, "there's something else. The FBI found communications on my computer between you and me that I never sent or received. Love letters, planning documents for taking over the company, Discussions about framing Michael for crimes we committed. Sarah ended the call and looked at Diana with growing horror. He played us. Michael played all of us. Played. It gets worse, Diana said quietly. The family court judge has issued an emergency order removing David from your custody pending investigation of the new criminal allegations. Child Protective Services is on their way here now. Sarah instinctively held her son closer, her maternal instincts screaming against the injustice of what was happening. They can't take him again. Diana, they can't keep taking my baby away from me. Sarah, with these new allegations, the court considers you a flight risk and potentially dangerous. The fabricated evidence makes it look like you've been planning an elaborate criminal conspiracy for months. A knock on the family room door interrupted them. Janet Morrison from Child Protective Services entered with the same gentle but implacable expression she'd worn during David's first removal. Mrs. Collins, I need to inform you that we have court orders for immediate removal of your son, pending investigation of new criminal allegations. No, Sarah said, standing with David in her arms. This is based on fabricated evidence. My husband is framing me. Mrs. Collins, I understand your position, but I have court orders. Please don't make this more difficult than necessary. Sarah looked down at her son's peaceful face, memorizing every detail. David was thriving now, healthy and strong, but he was about to be separated from his mother again based on lies and manufactured evidence. As Janet Morrison took David from Sarah's arms, Sarah felt something break inside her chest. Not just her heart, but her faith in justice, in truth, in the possibility that good people could triumph over evil through legal means. How long? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. Until the investigation is complete, Janet replied. Given the complexity of the allegations, it could be weeks or months. After they left with her son, Sarah collapsed into a chair, feeling more defeated than she ever had in her life. Michael had systematically destroyed every victory she'd achieved, turning her allies into alleged co-conspirators and her evidence into proof of her own crimes. Diana sat beside her, both women staring at the empty family room where David had been playing just minutes earlier. He's not human, Sarah said quietly. Michael isn't human. No human being could orchestrate something this cruel and calculated. Sarah, we're going to fight this. We're going to expose every lie and prove every piece of fabricated evidence. But even Diana's voice lacked its usual conviction. They were fighting an opponent who seemed to anticipate every move, who had resources and connections they'd underestimated, and who was willing to destroy innocent people to protect himself. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number she now recognized as Michael. Some people never learn when they're beaten. Enjoy visiting David through glass windows. Sarah stared at the message, feeling her despair transform into something darker and more focused. Michael had just made his final mistake. He'd shown her that playing by the rules would never be enough to defeat someone who had no rules at all. Diana, Sarah said, her voice becoming steadier. I need to make a phone call. The woman who answered Sarah's call was someone she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, not since their professional relationship had ended in Sarah's decision to give up her career for marriage. Elena Vasquez speaking. Elena, it's Sarah Collins. Sarah Martinez, before I got married. The pause on the other end stretched for several seconds. Elena Vasquez was now the CEO of Meridian Industries, a Fortune 500 company. But 3 years ago, she'd been Sarah's boss and mentor at a high-end marketing firm. Sarah, Elena's voice was surprised but warm. I heard about your situation through the industry grapevine. I'm so sorry about what you're going through. Elena, I need help. I'm fighting someone who has more resources and fewer scruples than I ever imagined possible. Michael Collins, Elena said grimly. I've been following the news coverage. Sarah, I need to tell you something. Collins approached my company 6 months ago seeking investment in his tech firm. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What did you find? We do extensive due diligence on potential investments. What we discovered about Coltech Solutions was concerning enough that we not only declined to invest, but we flagged several irregularities for potential regulatory review. Elena's voice became more serious. Sarah, your husband has been running a sophisticated Ponzi scheme disguised as a tech company. The revenue he's been reporting to investors is largely fictional, generated through shell companies and fraudulent contracts. Do you have documentation? Complete financial analysis, forensic accounting reports, and evidence of securities fraud going back at least 3 years. We were preparing to submit our findings to the SEC when Collins was arrested on the identity theft charges. Sarah felt a spark of hope igniting in her chest. Elena, would you be willing to help me fight him? Sarah, I've been waiting for this call. What Collins is doing to you is unconscionable, but what he's been doing to investors and employees is criminal. Meridian Industries has significant resources, and we're prepared to use them. The conversation that followed changed everything Sarah understood about her situation. Elena explained that Meridian had been investigating Michael for months as part of their due diligence process. They'd uncovered evidence of financial crimes that went far beyond what Robert had discovered. More importantly, Elena had connections throughout the business and legal communities that could level the playing field against Michael's resources. Sarah, I'm going to propose something that might sound unusual, Elena said. Meridian Industries wants to acquire the legitimate assets of Coltech Solutions through bankruptcy proceedings. We're prepared to offer you a position as senior marketing director, with a salary that would give you the financial independence to fight for custody of your son. Elena, I can't accept charity. This isn't charity. You're one of the most talented marketing professionals I've ever worked with. 3 years ago, you had the potential to run your own agency. I'm offering you the chance to rebuild your career while we help you fight Michael Collins. That afternoon, Sarah met with Elena and Meridian's legal team in a downtown conference room that screamed corporate power and unlimited resources. The contrast with the shabby family court offices where Sarah had been fighting for her son couldn't have been more stark. Mrs. Collins, said James Rodriguez, Meridian's chief legal counsel, we've reviewed your case extensively. What your husband has done represents one of the most sophisticated campaigns of financial and emotional abuse we've encountered. He spread documents across the conference table. We have evidence that Michael Collins has been planning this divorce strategy for over a year. The fake evidence, the isolation campaign, the character assassination, all of it was carefully orchestrated. Sarah studied the timeline James had constructed. He's been planning to leave me for a year? Longer. We found communications suggesting he began developing his exit strategy shortly after you became pregnant. Everything that's happened has been designed to leave you powerless while he maintains complete control over your son and his business interests. Elena leaned forward. Sarah, we're prepared to fund a comprehensive legal defense. Private investigators, forensic accountants, expert witnesses, whatever it takes to expose Michael's lies and win back custody of your son. In exchange for what? Your talent and expertise helping us build Meridian's new technology division, plus the satisfaction of seeing justice done to someone who represents everything wrong with corporate culture. Sarah looked around the conference room at faces that reflected competence, resources, and most importantly, the same anger she felt about Michael's systematic cruelty. There's one more thing, James added. We've been in contact with Robert Sterling. The evidence against him is fabricated, just as you suspected. We're prepared to provide him with legal representation and prove his innocence, which will help establish the pattern of false evidence in your case as well. For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt like she was no longer fighting alone against impossible odds. Michael had resources and connections, but he'd made enemies of people with even more resources and deeper connections. What do we do first? Sarah asked. Elena smiled with the confidence of someone who'd built a billion-dollar company through strategic thinking and relentless execution. We show Michael Collins what happens when he goes to war with people who have more money, better lawyers, and fewer ethical constraints than he does. James opened another folder. Sarah, are you prepared to fight as dirty as Michael has been fighting? Because once we start this, there's no going back. Sarah thought about her son, sleeping in a foster home because of lies and fabricated evidence. She thought about Michael's text message gloating about her powerlessness. She thought about the systematic campaign to destroy her reputation, her relationships, and her future. James, she said quietly, I'm prepared to fight dirtier than Michael Collins ever imagined possible. Elena Vasquez had built Meridian Industries by understanding that corporate warfare required both overwhelming resources and surgical precision. Within 48 hours of their alliance, Sarah discovered what it meant to have a Fortune 500 company fighting on her side. Michael Collins thinks he's playing chess, Elena explained as they sat in Meridian's war room, surrounded by laptops, legal documents, and a timeline covering an entire wall. But he's been playing against amateur opponents. Now he's facing professionals. James Rodriguez had assembled a team that included former FBI investigators, digital forensics experts, and corporate attorneys who specialize in high-stakes litigation. The resources at their disposal made Sarah's previous legal efforts look like a child's lemonade stand. First, James explained, we're going to prove that every piece of evidence Michael has presented against you and Robert is fabricated. Our digital forensics team has already identified the metadata inconsistencies in the fake photos and documents. He pulled up computer screens showing technical analysis that was completely beyond Sarah's understanding, but obviously devastating to Michael's case. Second, we're going to expose the full scope of Michael's financial crimes, not just the identity theft and embezzlement, but securities fraud involving millions of dollars and dozens of investors. Elena added, Michael has been using Coltech Solutions as his personal piggy bank for years, but he's also been defrauding investors with false revenue reports and fabricated client contracts. We have evidence that could put him in federal prison for decades. The investigation moved with frightening efficiency. Private investigators traced Michael's financial transactions, revealing a web of shell companies and fraudulent accounts. Digital forensics experts proved that the evidence against Sarah and Robert had been manufactured using sophisticated software. Corporate attorneys filed motions that challenged every aspect of Michael's legal strategy, but the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Sarah, James said during their morning briefing, we found Jessica Vale. Sarah looked up from the custody documents she'd been reviewing. Michael's girlfriend? Where has she been? Hiding in her lawyer's office, apparently. She contacted us yesterday through intermediaries, claiming she has information that could destroy Michael's credibility permanently. Elena's expression was grimly satisfied. It appears that Michael made the same mistake with Jessica that he made with you. He underestimated her intelligence and overestimated her loyalty. The meeting with Jessica took place in a secure conference room with multiple lawyers present. Sarah hadn't seen the woman who'd helped destroy her marriage since the baby shower disaster, and she was surprised by Jessica's appearance. Gone was the confident, glamorous actress. In her place sat a frightened young woman who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. Sarah, Jessica said quietly, I owe you an apology that I can never fully give. What Michael and I did to you was unforgivable. What happened, Jessica? Jessica pulled out a tablet and showed Sarah dozens of text messages and recorded conversations. Michael has been recording everything. Every conversation, every intimate moment, every private discussion. He's been blackmailing me for months. Sarah studied the evidence with growing horror. Michael had been documenting his affair with Jessica not out of sentimentality, but as leverage. When Jessica tried to end their relationship after his arrest, Michael threatened to release intimate recordings that would destroy her career and reputation. He told me that if I didn't cooperate with his legal strategy, he'd make sure I never worked in entertainment again, Jessica continued. But Sarah, some of the things he asked me to do were so awful that I couldn't go through with them. What kinds of things? Jessica's voice dropped to a whisper. He wanted me to testify that you had threatened to harm your baby if you lost custody. He wanted me to claim that you'd offered me money to lie about his character. He had scripts prepared for me to memorize. Elena leaned forward intently. Jessica, do you have recordings of Michael asking you to commit perjury? Hours of them. Michael is obsessive about documentation. He records everything because he thinks it gives him power over people. James Rodriguez was already taking notes. Jessica, with your testimony in these recordings, we can prove not only that Michael has been manipulating the family court proceedings, but that he's been attempting to suborn perjury and obstruct justice. The final piece of their counter-campaign came from an analysis of Michael's business communications. Elena's team had discovered that Michael had been planning his divorce strategy for over 18 months, coordinating with lawyers and private investigators long before he served Sarah with papers. He's been treating your marriage like a hostile corporate takeover, Elena explained, every move calculated to maximize his advantages and minimize yours. The evidence was overwhelming. Michael hadn't just cheated on his wife and stolen from his company. He'd orchestrated an elaborate campaign of fraud, manipulation, and legal abuse designed to destroy Sarah's life while protecting his own interests. When do we strike? Sarah asked. Tomorrow morning, James replied. We're filing criminal complaints with the FBI, submitting evidence to the family court judge, and releasing our findings to the financial press simultaneously. Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. Michael Collins wanted to destroy your reputation through media manipulation. Tomorrow we're going to show him what real media manipulation looks like when it's backed by truth and unlimited resources. That evening, Sarah sat in her temporary apartment, looking at photos of her son that she was only allowed to see during supervised visits. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either she would win back her child and her life, or Michael's counterattack would destroy her completely. But for the first time since her nightmare began, Sarah felt like she was fighting with weapons that matched her opponent's. Michael Collins had taught her that playing by the rules was a luxury she couldn't afford. Now she was going to teach him what happened when someone with unlimited resources and nothing left to lose decided to fight without rules at all. Get ready, Michael, she said quietly to the empty apartment. Tomorrow you learn what real power looks like. The morning that destroyed Michael Collins' life forever began with FBI agents arresting him at his luxury hotel suite while he was having breakfast with potential investors from Dubai. Sarah watched the news coverage from Elena's office, surrounded by lawyers and investigators who'd spent weeks building their case. The footage showed Michael being led away in handcuffs while confused investors demanded explanations from Coltech's remaining executives. Federal agents arrested Tech CEO Michael Collins this morning on charges including securities fraud, money laundering, identity theft, and obstruction of justice, the news anchor reported. The charges stem from what prosecutors are calling one of the most sophisticated corporate fraud schemes in recent years. James Rodriguez muted the television and turned to Sarah with satisfaction. The FBI found everything we predicted they'd find. False financial records, fabricated investor contracts, shell companies designed to launder stolen funds. Michael's entire business empire was built on lies. But Sarah's attention was focused on her phone, where she'd just received the call she'd been praying for. Mrs. Collins, Judge Harrison's clerk, had said, "The judge wants to see you in chambers immediately regarding custody of your son." An hour later, Sarah sat in Judge Harrison's private office while he reviewed the mountain of evidence that Elena's team had compiled. The judge's expression grew increasingly grim as he studied document after document, proving that Michael's case had been built on fabricated evidence and perjured testimony. "Mrs. Collins," Judge Harrison said finally, "I want to personally apologize for the injustices you've suffered in my courtroom. The evidence of fraudulent documentation and witness manipulation in your case is overwhelming." Sarah felt tears threatening, but maintained her composure. "Your Honor, I just want my son back." "Mrs. Collins, I'm issuing an immediate order returning full custody of your son to you, with no restrictions or supervision required. Additionally, I'm ordering a complete investigation into how fabricated evidence was allowed to influence custody decisions in this case." Judge Harrison's voice grew angry. "Your husband's attempts to manipulate family court proceedings represent one of the most egregious cases of legal abuse I've encountered in 20 years on the bench." 20 minutes later, Sarah was holding baby David in her arms for the first time in 3 weeks. He'd grown noticeably in their time apart, but he settled immediately against her chest as if no time had passed at all. "Hello, sweetheart," she whispered, tears finally flowing freely. "Mommy's here. Mommy's never going away again." Diana stood beside them, openly crying with relief and joy. "Sarah, it's over. You won. You actually won." But the victory was more complete than Sarah had dared to hope. Elena called that afternoon with news that Coltech Solutions had officially filed for bankruptcy, with Meridian Industries positioned to acquire the company's legitimate assets through court-supervised proceedings. "Sarah, I meant what I said about the job offer. When you're ready, Meridian's technology division would benefit enormously from your expertise." More satisfying was the call from Robert Sterling, who'd been completely exonerated when the fabricated evidence against him was exposed. "Sarah," Robert said, "I can never thank you enough for fighting for both of us. Michael's lies almost destroyed my life, but your courage saved us both." "Robert, we saved each other. You were the first person brave enough to stand up to Michael, even when it cost you everything." The final blow to Michael's criminal empire came from Jessica Vale's testimony to federal prosecutors. Her recordings of Michael attempting to suborn perjury provided evidence for additional charges that could keep him in prison for decades. Jessica had also provided evidence that Michael had been blackmailing several other women with intimate recordings, adding multiple counts of extortion to his growing list of federal charges. 6 months later, Sarah sat in a federal courthouse listening as Judge Martinez sentenced Michael Collins to 12 years in federal prison for securities fraud, identity theft, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. "Mr. Collins," Judge Martinez said, "your crimes represent a betrayal of trust that goes far beyond financial fraud. You systematically destroyed the lives of people who loved and trusted you, including your own wife and unborn child." Michael, wearing an orange prison jumpsuit and looking 20 years older than his age, showed no emotion as his sentence was read. His carefully constructed image as a successful entrepreneur had been replaced by the reality of what he'd always been, a criminal who viewed other people as resources to be exploited. Additionally, Judge Martinez continued, "You will pay restitution to your victims totaling $8.7 million, and you are permanently barred from serving as an officer or director of any publicly traded company." Sarah felt no satisfaction in Michael's downfall, only relief that her son would never have to fear his father's manipulation and cruelty. As they left the courthouse, baby David sleeping peacefully in his stroller, Diana walked beside Sarah with obvious pride. "So what's next?" Diana asked. Sarah looked up at the courthouse steps where she'd once felt helpless and defeated. Now she felt strong, capable, and ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. "Now we build something better," Sarah said. "David deserves to grow up in a world where people like his father can't destroy innocent lives without consequences." Elena had offered Sarah more than just a job. She'd offered her the chance to help build corporate policies that protected employees and investors from the kind of predatory behavior Michael had perfected. "Sarah," Elena had said during their most recent meeting, "you understand financial abuse and corporate manipulation from a perspective that could help us develop better protections for vulnerable people." Robert Sterling had also emerged from the wreckage of Caltech with new purpose. He'd started a consulting firm that specialized in helping small businesses avoid the kind of financial fraud that had nearly destroyed his life. "Michael taught us both valuable lessons about trust and verification," Robert had told Sarah. "Now we can use those lessons to help other people avoid becoming victims." As Sarah walked away from the courthouse carrying her son toward their new life, she realized that Michael's greatest failure hadn't been his crimes or his cruelty. His greatest failure had been underestimating the strength and intelligence of the people he'd tried to destroy. He'd thought he was divorcing a helpless, dependent woman. Instead, he'd awakened a force that ultimately destroyed everything he'd built through lies and manipulation. Justice, Sarah reflected, didn't always come quickly or easily, but sometimes it came completely. 2 years after Michael Collins was sentenced to federal prison, Sarah stood in the boardroom of Meridian Industries, presenting quarterly results to the company's executive team. As Director of Corporate Ethics and Fraud Prevention, she'd helped implement policies that had become industry standards for protecting employees and investors. "Our new verification protocols have identified and prevented 3 potential fraud schemes this quarter alone," Sarah reported to the assembled executives. "The financial savings to our investors total over $15 million. Elena Vasquez, now chairman of the board after promoting herself out of day-to-day operations, smiled with obvious pride. "Sarah, your work has revolutionized how we approach corporate security. Other companies are literally paying us to license the protocols you've developed." After the meeting, Sarah returned to her office overlooking the city where her nightmare had once unfolded. Photos of 2-year-old David decorated her desk, showing a healthy, happy toddler who had no memory of the early trauma that had shaped his mother's determination to build a better world. Diana knocked on her office door and entered carrying coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose sister had not only survived, but thrived. "How did the board meeting go?" Diana asked. "They approved my proposal for the victim advocacy program," Sarah replied with satisfaction. "Starting next quarter, Meridian will provide pro bono legal services and financial support to employees facing domestic financial abuse." Diana settled into the chair across from Sarah's desk. "You know Michael's parole hearing is coming up next month." Sarah nodded calmly. "I'm aware. The prosecutor called to ask if I wanted to provide a victim impact statement. Do you?" Sarah considered the question. Michael Collins had been a distant, irrelevant figure for most of David's life. Her son called Robert Uncle Robert and had never asked why his biological father wasn't part of their lives. "No," Sarah said finally. "Michael Collins has taken enough of my energy and attention. I'd rather spend that time building something positive than dwelling on his failures." The choice to focus forward rather than backward had defined Sarah's approach to rebuilding her life. Instead of pursuing maximum punishment for Michael, she channeled her experience into preventing similar abuse from happening to other people. Robert Sterling knocked on her office door and entered carrying flowers and wearing a nervous expression that made Sarah smile. "These are beautiful," Sarah said, accepting the bouquet. "What's the occasion?" "Sarah, I've been wanting to ask you something for months, but I wasn't sure if the timing was right." Diana immediately stood up with a knowing grin. "I think I'll let you two have this conversation privately." After Diana left, Robert sat down and pulled out a small velvet box that made Sarah's heart skip. "Sarah Collins," he said with a voice that shook slightly, "you're the strongest, most intelligent, most compassionate person I've ever known. Will you marry me?" Sarah looked at the ring, then at Robert's hopeful face, then at the photos of David on her desk, the little boy who called Robert Uncle Robert, but who'd clearly benefit from having him as a more permanent part of their family. "Robert Sterling," she said with a smile that felt like sunrise. "Yes." As Robert slipped the ring onto her finger, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. She'd started as a woman trying to escape an abusive marriage, and she'd emerged as someone who could protect herself and others from similar predators. "There's one condition," Sarah said with mock seriousness. "Anything. David gets to be your best man at the wedding." Robert laughed, the sound bright and clean and full of joy. "I wouldn't have it any other way." 6 months later, Sarah married Robert in a small ceremony attended by family, friends, and colleagues who'd supported her through the darkest period of her life. Elena served as her maid of honor, Diana gave an emotional speech about sisterhood and survival, and 2-year-old David carried the rings down the aisle with the serious concentration of someone performing an important job. As they exchanged vows, Sarah thought about the woman she'd been 3 years ago. Isolated, financially dependent, and willing to accept cruelty as the price of security. That woman was gone, replaced by someone who understood her own worth and refused to accept anything less than genuine partnership and respect. "I promise to support your dreams," Robert said as part of his vows, "to respect your independence, and to never make you choose between love and your own identity." "I promise to trust you with my heart," Sarah replied, "to build something extraordinary together, and to never again hide who I am from the person I love." After the ceremony, as guests celebrated in Elena's garden, Sarah held David on her hip and watched her new husband talking animatedly with Diana about their upcoming honeymoon plans. "Mama," David said, tugging on her dress. "Happy?" "Yes, sweetheart," Sarah said, kissing his forehead. "Mama's very happy." And she was. Not the desperate, dependent happiness she'd once thought she wanted, but the deep, sustainable contentment that came from knowing she could take care of herself and the people she loved. Michael Collins had tried to teach her that she was powerless without him. Instead, he taught her that she was powerful enough to survive anything. Sometimes, Sarah reflected, the greatest gift a villain could give was proving that they were wrong about everything that mattered. As the sun set over their wedding celebration, Sarah looked toward the future with confidence, surrounded by people who loved her for exactly who she was, and knowing that no one would ever again have the power to make her forget her own worth. The millionaire who divorced his pregnant wife for an actress had lost everything that truly mattered. The woman he'd tried to destroy had gained everything she'd never dared to dream possible. In the end, justice hadn't just been served, it had been transformed into something better. Wisdom, strength, and the unshakable knowledge that some victories are worth every battle it takes to achieve them. If this story of ultimate justice got your heart pumping and your faith in karma restored, show some love by hitting that like button. It really helps more people discover these incredible tales of people getting exactly what they deserve. Drop a comment below and tell me, what was the most satisfying moment of Sarah's comeback? Was it when Michael got arrested in front of his investors, or when she walked into that boardroom with the power of a Fortune 500 company behind her? Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell, because trust me, you don't want to miss our next story. We've got tales of revenge, justice, and people discovering that underestimating the quiet ones is always a dangerous game. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear a story about rising above impossible odds and coming out stronger, share this video with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that no matter how powerless we feel, there's always a way to fight back and win. Thanks for joining me on this incredible journey, and I'll see you in the next story where justice always finds a way.